Hello and welcome to my video on placebo and nocebo effect. In this video, I will discuss how esophageal cancer is a nocebo effect and how I had overcome it. First, something that I must say right at the start, and that is the notion that toxic, inhumane people can give you cancer is false. No one can cause you to develop cancer or to have cancer. As you will see, cancer is a nocebo effect. So, what does that mean? Toxic people will try to influence you to react in some way. That influence is in the form of ideas which are mentally presented to you at the same time as a concealed threat is posed. Your reaction is the nocebo effect, but because it's your reaction, and when you know about the cheats, then you don't have to react. You are in control because it's your reaction. It's not something that someone else has caused in your body. And when you realize that the ideas are false, you don't react, or you stop reacting, so there won't be any nocebo effect. In cancer, it is a little more complex than the concealed threat together with the ideas, although in some cancers, those two alone are enough. However, in esophageal cancer, as in many other cancers as well, there needs to be some other sort of reactivity in the body, in that particular area, in that particular organ as well. And in my case, I had severe anxiety that I had no idea what it was about. In fact, I thought I had the flu. It was that bad that I actually thought I was sick with the flu. I also had a sore throat, and over the coming days and weeks, 2-3 weeks, I was progressively having more and more difficulty swallowing solid food. So I had to not just chew my food fairly well, but much more than that, to make it a paste to be able to swallow it. There seemed to be an obstruction in my esophagus. I also felt very angry, and I couldn't understand why I was that angry. Now, once I recognized what the problem was, I was able to resolve it. So I need to explain to you what had happened, and what events had taken place, and how I was being troubled. Just before all this started, some new neighbours had called me down and made a very strange request. They said, a little bit of water for the chipper, as they were cutting down some trees. I didn't understand why they wanted water for the chipper. That sounded crazy, but I thought, what's the point of arguing? I told them that they could take some water from my tap at the front of my driveway, but not to take a lot. She repeated that they only wanted just a little bit of water, and they continued laughing. Then, as I walked down my driveway, I came to the second tap and I told them they were not to go down the driveway and go to the second tap. And the woman again spoke up and said, "Can't go down there." I took no further notice and went inside. Then, in the coming days and weeks, I was being hassled continuously with ideas about having been cheated and damage being done and cutting across the front of it, and the idea "can't go down there," and what seemed to be memories of my friend having an operation to remove the tumour from her esophagus. I became quite sick in the end, the last couple of weeks. Now, I must say something here, and that is that certainly in the first couple of weeks, I certainly was outside in the front of my yard on various occasions. But I realised, much later I realised that whenever they saw me outside, all the foul games stopped. And the reason that happened is because they didn't want me to see what was going on. They wanted me to have purely a subliminal perception, and a perception that something was affecting me, because that was how they were going to affect me. Then one day, while I was making some coffee, I looked out of my window and I saw two men doing damage at the front of my property. All of the anger that I had been feeling, which was along with the anxiety, it came to a fore. I raced outside in my dressing gown and confronted them. One of them ran away as soon as he saw me, and the other one was trying to make out he didn't know what I was talking about. As I was confronting him, the overseer saw us and came over to ask what the problem was. And then I saw a backhoe coming across the front of my yard doing even more damage. Angrily, I said to him, "You have no permission to come onto my property. Why don't you just get a crane to bring the logs onto the street?" He immediately then moved to ask for my permission. I thought about it and I thought perhaps that's the best way, is to give permission, because then they can't do a violation and continue to use it against me. Then, with the problem sorted, I started to head back inside, and as I walked down my driveway, I realised I had taken my dressing gown off. So the whole feeling sick and having the flu, it seemed to have evaporated in just the space of 10 or 15 minutes, as long as the argument took place. I found that amazing. So when I got back inside, I started to write down what emotions I had been experiencing and what the bodily reactivity would have been. I was experiencing severe anxiety, as there was added anger to the mix. And I now knew that my anger was due to a serious violation. And remember, there is a concealed threat used in these cheats. So I was feeling a lot of fear and anger, which were raising my metabolism and making me feel very hot. Then, as I was trying to figure out what the hell was happening and trying to think about all the ideas that were arising, my body then moved to resting metabolism in order for me to think and reason. And when my body tried to get down to resting metabolism, it would trigger the sweating mechanism, because it was detecting a lot of heat. So therefore I was sweating a lot. Having written all of that down, then I realised that all the sick feeling was really a mixture of emotions that were bubbling up and down as different issues were arising. So I wasn't sick at all. In fact, I was now feeling very, very well. Then there was another surprise. Within the next 24 hours or so, my sore throat disappeared miraculously. But then I realised if it was my immune system creating inflammation due to the idea of there being damage at the front of it, then of course, when the immune system stopped the inflammatory response, my body cleared away any damage that was there. But the really big surprise came about a week or so later, when I quite literally caught myself wolfing down my food. I could hardly believe it. On contemplating this surprise, I began to understand what had happened in my body and why it had happened. I will explain my understanding here now, but in the next video I will show you the evidence I subsequently gained in yet another episode of cancer. The light turned on for me when I suddenly realised that I was no longer feeling being affected by the damage or the cutting across the front of it and can't go down there, etc., as something in my body. I now related to it as something happening outside in my yard. Not only outside of my body, outside of my house. Why did this make a difference? Because the combined reactivity in my esophagus, the mirror neuron response overlapping the anxiety problem, was no longer happening and no longer confusing. So there was only the anxiety problem, and that was clear. I will explain this in the next video, but briefly here, my body was no longer reacting to some spurious reactivity and an idea of possible danger. And once it stopped reacting, what had been set up was cleared away. I'll explain all of this in detail in the next video. Thank you for viewing my video. And here are some bush turkeys sunning the feathers under their wings. So they've lifted their wings up to get the sun.